Broadcasting live from the orbiting underground moon base, it's the LRRcast. Thank you so much for taking up that role, since I'm unable to do so.
I don't even know what that riff is from.
We have me, I'm Kathleen, and joining me is Alex.
Hi.
And Cameron.
Hello.
So, and last week, they talked about services they subscribe to, but this week we're going to talk about food.
Chow.
Chow. Because everybody loves food.
Nosh.
Favorite food, go-to recipes, traditions, all of that good kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Cam, Alex, did your parents ever teach you how to make any food that you still make to this day?
No.
No?
No. My dad was very adamant that cooking was something that he taught himself.
Huh.
So, you had to teach yourself?
Yeah, he didn't know how to teach it, I guess.
Interesting.
Well,
It was improvisational.
I mean, to a certain extent, I would say that when you get to be a really good cook, I'd say, yeah, that it is improvisational. Like, when, you know, you're tasting something and you're like, it needs more salt. But it's not like you're like, oh, I'm tasting the soup and it needs exactly a quarter of a teaspoon more salt.
Yeah, I feel as though, like, high-end cooking, in some ways, like, is the kind of cooking that pisses off people that need exact measurements and stuff, because it's like, oh, it's a dash of this and a little bit, a smidge of that, and it's like, how much? It's like, well, I actually don't have an answer for you, because I never measure anything.
Well, and the thing is, like, once you cook a lot, you don't necessarily need measurements. Like, I know recipes that I've made since I've been cooking, stuff like chicken a la king, I don't need to measure out how much roux I need to make and how much milk I need to add to the roux. I just kind of eyeball it and it always turns out fine. But I've made that recipe probably 100 times. So there is something to that. But that's also bullshit, because you can't learn that unless you follow recipes and learn how to cook.
Womp womp.
Well, I was listening to CBC a few years ago, and they were doing an interview with a woman who was archiving recipes from basically prairie housewives in the 19th century. And 19th and early 20th century, and she said that, like, their recipes would basically just be a list of ingredients and, like, secret tech ingredients, right? You don't use this brand of flour, you use this kind of flour, but it had no quantities and it had no instructions, because that was common knowledge.
Yeah, you know how to make a cake.
Yeah, you make a cake using this stuff.
Yeah, and that was the recipe. It was just a list of, like, either, or in some cases, just the substitutions.
Interesting. Yeah. I feel like once you get to, like, sort of god tier level cookery, that you definitely don't need quantities. And, like, I mean,
unless it's like some sort of thing.
Well, unless
that
you're
has to
baking.
be, yeah, there you go.
Don't do that when you bake. That just leads to disasters. Baking is like chemistry. Cooking is kind of like witchcraft, as in there's a cauldron and you throw stuff into it. But I mean, like,
well, baking, you create a batter or a pastry, and it goes in one event, whereas when you're cooking, if you're making a soup, you can make dynamic adjustments to it.
Exactly. You know, you taste it and you're like, this flavor is too rich, or, ooh, this is too dominant. I need to cut it with something else.
You dial it in, whereas, like, baking, you get it right or it's fucked.
Yeah. Well, and plus, like, the ratios for baking, like, you know, you need certain amounts of stuff to make the chemical reactions to make it rise, which is why you can't be like, oh, I want to make vegan cookies, or vegan cake, so I'm just not going to have any egg in this. And the thing is, you can't just cut the egg out of cake, because the egg is what makes it rise. Like, that's a very basic thing. That's why a lot of vegan cake recipes have vinegar and baking soda, because they do the same effect. You can't just substitute, like, egg for, like, applesauce, because there's a liquid component, but there you also still need that chemical reaction of the egg rising and binding and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of little things.
Chemistry, artistry, food.
Together. So, Cam, you know how to cook. You're a fine cook. You've taught yourself how to cook a little bit over the years. I've had food you've made, and it's been really good. You made fantastic mac and cheese up at the cabin.
I have heard rumors of this mac and cheese.
It was really, really rich.
Yeah, well, it's macaroni and cheese. You have it, like, once every 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I kind of, well, also macaroni and cheese is a very, very basic recipe. Right, you make a roux, you add cream, you add milk. or you add cream, you add cheese, you pour it over macaroni, you bake it, and it's done.
Well, it's really simple, and yet there's a lot of room for, I mean, adjustments and, you know, variations on it. You know, it's like you can, do you bake it or do you not bake it? Do you put a crust on top? Do you not? What kind of cheese do you use? What kind of noodles do you use?
Right. So yeah, there's lots of micro adjustments to be made.
But the general recipe is
it's the same. There's an armature that you hang things off of.
The cheese armature.
Or a flavor armature, or I don't know what you would call it.
The basic structure of the recipe is carbohydrates and a roux. Well, I guess it's a bechamel sauce, technically. Yes. Yeah, I came by and I was like, because you were like busy and working and stuff. I'm like, do you want any help? And you're like, well, I just have to make the roux. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're making a roux, you already kind of know what you're doing, so I'm going to leave you alone then. Well, no, but like the thing is, like, I have seen people who think that to make macaroni and cheese, you just melt cheese onto macaroni.
Yeah, oh, God.
For the benefit of the viewers, what's a roux?
A roux is... Actually, do you want to do it?
This was a trivia question at my quiz last night, because I did a round on food.
With the idea.
A roux is a base for sauces and stews and gravies. It's primarily used in European cuisine, and it's basically you cook together wheat flour and fat. And it is traditionally butter. You can use margarine if that's your thing and you're trying to save money or calories. Margarine's not necessarily better for you than butter. You can use bacon fat. They use bacon fat in a lot of Cajun cuisine. And basically what you're trying to do is you cook these two things together. And then how long do you cook it for? It depends what you're using it for. You can do a roux in a variety of colors. And the longer you cook it, the darker it will get. And the less thickening power it will have. So that's something you have to note because you're sort of cooking the starch out a little bit. Oh. But here's the deal. You do have to cook it for at least, I say at least 30 seconds because you need to get the flour flavor out of there because otherwise it will be floury. But anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute is what you want to do if you're making sort of a traditional cheese sauce or a bechamel.
It's a French word, isn't it?
Yeah.
R-O-U-X?
Yeah, R-O-U-X. And like basically it's equal parts fat and flour, and then that combination, one teaspoon fat, or 1 tablespoon butter, 1 tablespoon flour will thicken quite handily a cup of milk into a bechamel.
Now, of course, if you are wanting to make a darker sauce with your roux, like not a bechamel, you'll want to cook your roux longer so it has like a richer, less floury flavor. In that case, your ratios will change. Anyhow, most recipes that are sort of easy to approach will call for a light roux. So 1 to 1 to 1. 1 cup of liquid will be thickened by 1 teaspoon or tablespoon butter, 1 tablespoon flour, and so on and so forth. When I make it, I eyeball it because, like I said, I've been making it for so long, I know basically how much roux I need to make. So, anyhow.
There you go. This morning I was cooking on the other side of the world.
Oh.
I was using a recipe that Beej taught me that I have fallen very much in love with, is Oyakodon. It is so great, and I love it.
That's chicken and egg don.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't get along with eggs. I fucking hate eggs, except for a couple of dishes. It's weird. I'm trying to figure out what it is. I think it's like a no context egg that I can't deal with.
Just here's an egg.
Like here's an egg. It's like this is like chewing a fart. You know, that's how I feel about it. But if it's incorporated into something, like there's egg in the pad thai that I had just now. And there's egg in
egg in like fried rice and stuff
Oyakodon
like that.
is basically a chicken omelet on rice.
With a delicious sauce.
A delicious sauce that's really simple, but there is a secret ingredient.
All right, well, spill the recipe. Spill the beans. You've teased us enough. How do you make this?
Okay, well, you start with cooking up some onions. Like just chop them up and then do that until they're a little bit browned and kind of transparent. And then you add equal parts of mirin and soy sauce. And I use the low sodium soy sauce.
Can you explain what mirin is for people who might not be familiar with it?
It's rice wine, isn't it?
No.
I don't actually know what it is.
Isn't it rice vinegar?
It's like a rice vinegar thing. So I guess it's technically rice wine, but it's not alcoholic.
It's sweet, though.
Yeah.
I don't think it's vinegar.
It's got a vinegar base in it, but it's sweetened. Anyhow, yeah.
Yeah, it's a cornerstone of Japanese cuisine.
You can get it in any kind of Asian market.
Which brings us to the next ingredient. You have that all simmering, and then...
So you put the mirin and the soy sauce in with the onion. Yeah. So it's like onion, soy sauce, mirin soup.
Yep.
How much mirin and soy sauce do you put in? Like a teaspoon or a lot?
I put in a decent amount. I'd
like
say
a quarter
maybe quarter cup.
And that's for like a whole
something
onion?
Like that. Yeah.
I
use like half an onion.
Half an onion.
Because I like onion.
And so like a quarter cup of mirin and a quarter cup of soy sauce?
Yeah. I don't think I measure anything for this recipe.
Okay.
Which is
maybe a third cup then? I mean, half a cup is a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of total liquid at the top. Like how much liquid do you end up with?
I mean, it's flat, so it's hard to judge. Maybe half a cup, maybe 3/4 of a cup.
Okay.
So probably more like half a cup because it's like, I mean, you don't want too much sauce, otherwise it turns into soup.
But the sauce is delicious.
It is. And to finish the sauce, you dust the surface with dashi. So I got some of this from Beach. It's how the hell do they make it? It's like bonito,
planed fish, basically.
The plain fish turned into granules.
Yeah, basically bonito is like this dried, very savory, strongly flavored fish. And like when you buy bonito flakes, basically they take like a wood planer and like get these incredibly micro thin bits of it.
I'm trying to remember if that's what they use that as something in dashi. I really wish Beach was here because he could explain it so much better. Because
you can just buy dashi though, right?
Yeah, it's a sort of a soup. It's fishy. Powder
umami enhancer.
Umami intensifies. So you get a little bit of that on top, and then you simmer that for a bit, and then you throw in some chicken, which you cooked previously, and then you pour one. I wanted to say whipped, beaten egg on top of it, and you just cook it like an omelette. Then you throw that on top of some rice.
Nice.
And it's like,
so it's basically like liquid and chicken and onions and an egg, and it's all done in one pot.
Yep. It looks horrendous, but it smells so good and it tastes delicious.
Do you think you could? I guess if you were a vegetarian, you'd have to leave out the dashi. And could you substitute? But you could substitute tofu.
Yeah, no. I think this would work fine with tofu. I think I was desperate one time and did it with cheese instead of chicken.
How was it?
It was fine. I mean, it was a little weird, but...
Or you could just do a yaridon.
What's a yaridon?
It would be like vegetables.
Yeah. No, I think you could substitute just about anything with that.
Because the flavor comes from the sauce, not necessarily the ingredients, right? So is the chicken that's been cooked ahead of time, is it breaded? Is it fried? Is it like, how do you prepare it?
I just fry it with salt and pepper.
In another pan?
Yeah, in another pan. It's really bog standard. I just... brown it a little bit on the outside and then like chop it into pieces.
There you go. And that's Oyakodon.
Yep.
Cam, do you have any go-to deliciousness?
Well, there's a soup I like to make in the summer.
Oh, yeah. That's really
summer
good.
soup.
Yeah. And it's served cold. So it's really nice on a hot day.
Is it watercress?
No. You've had it before, actually. And it's like a kale avocado soup that's garlicky and lemony.
Ooh.
With a lot of dill and parsley. And it's kind of thick and ice cold and delicious and savory.
So how do you make it?
Well, what you do is you take about a handful, this many cashews, and you soak them in water.
Sorry, people who are listening.
A handful is probably half a cup.
Yeah, half a cup of cashews, unroasted, unsalted cashews, and soak them in water. Just cover them in water and then come back in an hour.
Just to soften them up a little bit?
Yeah, and you take that, and you pour off the water, and you throw it in a blender. You add the juice of 2 lemons.
Wait, you take the cashews you throw in the blender, or the water from the cashews?
No, you get rid of the water.
Okay.
Usually because it's a bit dusty and oily from cashew runoff, and the cashews will have absorbed all the water. You add the juice of 2 lemons, 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. And depending on how good your blender is, you can either chop them up beforehand or throw them in whole.
Not everybody has a Vitamix.
Yeah. What else? A handful of fresh dill, like a good handful of it. Lots of dill.
Fist of dill.
Yeah. Soy sauce. Lots of pepper. What else goes into it at this point? This is your soup base.
You mentioned avocado.
That goes in later. So you blend that together until it's smooth. You add a bit of water, but the juice of 2 lemons should provide enough liquid.
What sort of consistency are we talking? Are we talking like is it thick or is it more like
like a?
I'm trying to think of a food analog here. Is it thick like a runny yogurt?
Yeah. No. It's thinner than that. It is definitely a liquid.
So creamy.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. Creamy would be a good eggnog. Like
Okay, eggnog.
There you
Like
go.
perfect.
So basically, you want to play around with that a little bit and add water. It's very easy to compensate for things. You just don't want it to be too liquidy because you can't remove water, but you'll be adding more stuff to it later. At this point, you take another like good 2 handfuls of fresh parsley, chop it up, add it in. An entire avocado, add it in, minus the pit, obviously. I like to add a couple of handfuls of spinach, a couple of handfuls of kale. Lots of kale. Kale is really good in this. And if you're worried about the bitterness of kale, you don't have to worry about it because all the other flavors kind of come together and knead it out a little bit.
Do you take the ribs out of the kale?
No.
Really?
Yeah, the stalks go into it. Again, it depends on the quality of your blender, but they have a nice flavor that's distinct from that of the leaves. Again, also the stalks of the parsley have a subtly different flavor.
Well, it's just that I know a lot of people take like the thick like stalks. Like they basically, if you take a leaf of kale, I've seen a lot of people, they flatten it out basically and take a V shape and take out most of the stem because it's very tough.
Yeah.
But this kind of just gets obliterated by the blender, turns into more fiber.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, depending on the quality of your blender, you want to chop things up like finely before you throw it in. If you don't have a Vitamix that's powered by like a 747 engine.
Well, you don't have a Vitamix that's powered by a 747 engine. Like you just have like a regular blender,
Yeah, I have
don't
a
you?
regular like. I don't know, not grocery store, but
Just
like
you hit the afterburner for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, and it dumps raw fuel into it.
Into the turbine.
Half of a cucumber is also really good in this. So there's been dill,
particular
parsley,
kind?
cucumber, an English cucumber, seedless preferably, because they're not as bitter. I like a good handful of nutritional yeast because I find
What the hell is that? I've never
nutritional
heard of
yeast.
it.
It's like yellowy flakes. It's a vegan substitute generally for Parmesan cheese. It has the same kind of like umami flavor.
We're going to have to
else?
explain umami at some point.
Umami is, we can go back to that.
Yeah.
What else goes into it? Cucumber, kale, spinach, avocado, dill, parsley, lemons, garlic, cashews.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, and it is...
I'd try it.
Yeah, it kind of has... it's a bit like tzatziki, but it's not as potent, right?
Right, because tzatziki is
It
super
sounds like a
garlicky.
green tzatziki.
Yeah, a bit.
But it's a little waterier, so you can like just sip it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like...
Yeah, you don't really want to just like mow on tzatziki.
No, but like if you like tzatziki and...
Ooh.
Yeah, you want something less so that you could just eat. This is a good version of it. I made it at the cabin last year, and it was very popular.
I was not there.
You were there last year.
No. I was at the trivia contest the year before last.
The year before last, yes. You were there last year, though.
Well, I was there this year. I was...
Okay.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I don't remember the soup at all.
Okay.
Anyhow. Yeah. So it's good. I've had this
Ham's
at like
fugue soup.
I've had this at a summer party you brought, though.
Yeah.
And it was really good. It's like really good in the summertime when it's like hot and it's just crisp and refreshing. But also like filling and rich, which is nice.
Yeah. No, it's got a very, very robust body to
What
it.
paradox.
If you're not a huge fan of garlic, you might want to cut down the amount of garlic in it. Because the garlic
Who doesn't like garlic?
I know some people who don't like garlic.
Also,
Yeah,
it's
commies.
it's raw garlic,
So it's much stronger.
Ooh.
yeah, like the flavor can be very sharp. So like you want to monitor this, but remember that the spinach does cut everything down quite a lot.
Well, and
it's-
cucumber would as well, too.
Yeah, the cucumber softens it quite a bit, and it's like this beautiful, rich, vibrant green when it's.
Yeah, I
when
was
it's
going to
done.
say, this must have like an exquisite swatch on it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a jade green. Ooh. And you just crack a lot of pepper on top of it, maybe a bit of salt. If you're not vegetarian, you can add lean parents which is very good in it.
Worcestershire
sauce. Is really nice.
Worcester sauce is vegetarian, though, isn't it?
No, it's not. It has anchovies.
Oh, that's what gives it its flavor.
Well, part of it.
Yeah. That and the gunpowder and nitrates.
And the vinegar.
And nitrates.
Yeah, nitrates.
Nitrites.
Is there anything else that goes into it?
Love.
No, it takes about half an hour to make, and then you just throw it in the fridge for about an hour in a pickle jar or something. Oh, that's the other part. A dill pickle.
Oh.
Really? Even with all the dill you're putting in?
Yep. The vinegar is nice.
Interesting.
I also put in sea greens, which are just like dried seaweed.
Ugh, I hate that. I can't stand dulse. But I think in the context of this, it gets overwhelmed a little bit.
Yeah.
You won't even taste it.
Well, I mean, you probably get the saltiness and the savouriness off it.
Yeah.
Speaking of, what's umami?
Okay. So umami is a Japanese word that means the fifth taste, basically, is what it's referred to. So it doesn't actually mean the fifth taste.
The four existing ones are...
Well, the four that we think of that we got taught in school are probably sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. But umami is like meatiness, savouriness, richness. Like that is kind of how people like it's usually the flavor profile you get from meat or like soy sauce or Lee and Perrins is a good way to impart an umami flavor to things because it's very rich and proteiny almost.
It's salty, but there's something else there too.
Yeah.
Well, MSG is kind of another iconic umami flavor. Think of the flavor that you get from like an Alfredo sauce.
That doesn't really trigger umami to me.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Like
HP sauce sounds kind of umami to me.
Well, like Alfredo sauce is like rich and creamy but not necessarily like cheesy, right? Because there's a little bit of cheese, like a fresh grated Parmesan
a lot
in
of
it.
cheese in it, isn't there?
Traditional Alfredo sauce is cream and butter and then like a third of a cup of cheese.
No shit.
Yeah. It's mostly just cream and butter that gives it its delicious flavor.
Huh.
But yeah. So, anyhow, umami is a difficult flavor to describe. As you can see, Cam and I disagree on what flavors trigger it for us. But my recipe is an umami. It's an umami bomb. I will tell you how to make shepherd's pie from scratch. It's very easy.
Just imagine somebody like rubbing it into their skin. Just like, taste me.
So if you want to make shepherd's pie from scratch, it's very, very simple. It's very, very cheap too. And there are two options. If you are a vegetarian, you'll have to leave out a few of these ingredients. But if you are not a vegetarian, take 2 pounds of ground beef and fry it up.
Or lamb.
Lamb's expensive though, so I don't make mine with lamb because I can't afford it. Lamb's also really fatty. So if you are wanting to use lamb, you probably want to use a mix of beef and lamb, like say half and half. But you will have to drain the fuck out of that lamb because it's so fatty. A little bit of fat's probably good. Like if you're using lean ground beef like I do, you can probably just leave most of the fat in there, like take out like a tablespoon. This is typically how I do it. And just leave whatever else is in there for the noms. So you take 2 pounds of ground beef or a pound of ground beef and a pound of lamb. Or if you're a vegetarian, you can skip this step entirely. Ground round and refried beans.
Oh, refritos.
And then you can just basically mix ground round and refried beans together. The refried beans give it like that soupy, good consistency flavor. You put in a little bit of water to make it a little runnier, and then you mix in your vegetables and stuff, and then you just top it with potatoes and throw it in the oven and bake it.
Taters.
And it is really easy to make vegetarian shepherd's pie. Basically, you don't want it to be like super thick and goopy, but mostly goopy. So, but if you're making the meatitarian kind, take 2 pounds of ground beef and cook it, take off most of the fat. And then when it's mostly cooked, add a cup of beef stock, maybe a cup and a half, depending on how much you want. You want it to be like, basically like you want water to cover most of the beef. Like you want it to be like goopy. And then you can either add beef stock or a beef bouillon cube if you do not have stock on hand.
Maybe this is a stupid question, but is artificial beef flavored vegetarian?
You can actually buy vegetarian beef and chicken stock. I actually prefer that kind. That's the kind I always buy and keep on hand, because if I am making like food and I do have vegetarians coming over, I can still use like a chicken stock to like make a soup or something taste a lot richer. So yeah, so you can totally buy that. Anyhow, so then you take that and then you add a bunch of Liam parents to it, which is delicious. And like, I'm talking probably like a tablespoon, but like several good shakes is always how I do it. And then I taste this and I'm like, that tastes like beef and it tastes like umami and it's rich and it's great. And then I shit you not, this is not perhaps the most traditional shepherd's pie, but it is incredibly cheap and easy to prepare. Because you take those bags of like frozen chopped vegetables, like the peas, the beans, the carrots, and the corn. And then you add half of that. So it's just chock-a-block full of vegetables.
Dag.
Yeah. And then while you're doing this, you're like boiling potatoes and getting ready to mash them up. But that's another step. And then you take all that. And then there's two ways of you can thicken sauces. You can thicken sauces using like a roux. But you don't want to use a roux because you don't want to make like a rich sort of floury sauce. Roux are okay when you make them with water, but they're not the best. And you can do something much faster. And this is how they thicken a lot of Chinese food cuisine. So, and a lot of this water is going to start to cook down because you're like simmering the frozen vegetables together so they're cooked a little bit. And then, cooking off some of the stock and making sort of it reduces while you're doing all this. And you're not adding a ton of water anyhow. So what you do is you get some cornstarch, about 2 tablespoons, mix it with some cold water, whisk it together so there's no lumps, turn up your heat to high so your beef, vegetable, water mix is just boiling away. Add the cornstarch and stir like a motherfucker and it'll thicken up in about 30 seconds.
This is something I think I screwed up. You add the powder to the water, not the other way around, right?
No, you don't add the powder to anything. What you do, or I guess you do, but you have your pot of food that's cooking. You take a glass, like a drinking glass or a small bowl or something.
Yeah.
You add your cornstarch to that. You add cold water to that bowl or glass or whatever. Okay. And then you whisk that together so you're left with a white liquid. And then you take that white liquid and then you dump it into your hot liquid. And then you stir the hot liquid to incorporate the white liquid, and immediately your liquid, like the hot liquid you've stirred it into, will go cloudy and thicken.
Maybe I didn't use cold water last time because I had a hell of a time getting the lumps out.
Yes, you have to use cold water or it'll go lumpy because it's the cornstarch is sort of like the heat, which is why you want it briskly boiling when you do it. The heat is what sort of spreads the starch around and like causes it to thicken up. And so then you've done that. You've got kind of this hot, sort of thick, gloopy thing, and you put it to the side. Finish your potatoes. Pour that into a pan. It's already all cooked. Your potatoes are already all cooked. So you put a bunch of potatoes on top, put some paprika on top of those, and you put them in the oven for I put it in the oven for like 5 minutes at 350 and then turn on the broiler so it's all warm on top and like has the brown bits, and that's done. You're done. That is shepherd's pie. Not traditional, but cheap and easy and delicious. And then if you taste it and you're like, this doesn't have enough flavor, now that I've added all of my frozen vegetables, you can add a little bit more Liam Perrins or a little bit more beef stock or something like that. So, and like I said, you don't need to buy beef stock. You can just mix up a bouillon cube in water and get it warm ahead of time.
Shepherd's pie.
I'm very cheap.
I like
it's not traditional,
Kathleen.
but it's cheap and it's good and it's very filling. You have like an eighth of the pan, and you're like, oh, I'm full.
Man. Well, what's some of the things that you like having made for you? Things that you would maybe not necessarily even deign to try cooking yourself, but you'd like.
Croissants.
Ooh.
Yeah. Any kind of good baked good. There's no point in me doing it because it's going to be too expensive and not as good as I want. Oh, yeah. Well, and just like buying the ingredients for croissants. Like, unless you're baking them on scale, forget it.
I kind of wanted to make ramen, like proper ramen, but it seems like such a gigantic pain in the ass.
Oh, like making
we're talking
the
about
broth.
like days set aside just for this like soup. And I could just go up on the hill to Kuma and get some really, really good ramen. That place is so good, and it's ruined me on every other ramen in town because nothing compares to it. It's weird, and
If
Well,
you've never
I'm
had
lucky.
actual, like, legitimate, authentic Japanese-style ramen, I suggest you do. If you're a vegetarian, don't worry about it. You can get vegetarian ramen, but it's... How common would you say finding a vegetarian ramen restaurant is, Cam?
I have not.
I've seen that.
We're still looking.
Well, I've seen one in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
But like, so I've seen, like, I have seen it, and like, but I was wondering if you had personally come across one.
No, and it's difficult to ask a lot of the time because in Asian cuisine, saying I don't eat meat has a different connotation than it does in Western cuisine because they do not think of things like meat broth, like a beef broth, as being a meat ingredient.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas it just refers to flesh, like,
Well, there's no meat in this, just
Yeah.
beef stock.
and tendon.
Yeah.
And, right, that's not, like, a lot
Yeah.
of the meat adjacent meat products are not meat.
Right. They're not the actual, like, physical.
Right.
Interesting. That's like going to
It's like,
like,
oh, you don't want to chop.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
we'll give
fine.
you this, like,
I know.
meat-flavored meat sauce with meat shavings in
Yeah,
it.
like this, the translation isn't quite precise. It's like saying, I don't eat steak. And they're like, okay, you can have any of these.
Here's some
non-steak
consommé.
things. Yeah.
With
Yeah.
bacon bits.
Well, I know that like in like when you're traveling through Eastern Europe, you're like, oh, I don't eat meat. They're like, okay, we have sausages then. It's fine.
Yeah.
My friend Lindsay traveled all over the world and is a vegetarian, and but is also pragmatic, and found she was fine in Eastern Europe. But when she got to Southeast Asia, the language barrier and just, you know, trying to explain to people that she just had to be like, sometimes I'm like 98% sure I was just eating chicken broth, but what am I going to do about it, right? Like, I need to eat. I'm in a small town in rural Vietnam, right? I will, fingers crossed. So hope I don't get sick. So yeah. Let's see. What else? What do I not want to eat? What do I not want to cook at home? Any kind of like dessert stuff.
There's a lot of
I don't
pretty elaborate
bake.
desserts.
I don't bake at all. I don't like it very
Although
much.
some things are surprisingly not as hard as they might seem, which has just reminded me that I need to get Kim to make some ice cream this summer.
Oh.
Because she made it last year, and, well, we made pina colada ice cream, and it was
Did
really,
she use like real coconut cream?
really,
Was it like,
really good.
did you do the thing where you beat egg yolks with sugar to make like a custard, or was it?
I didn't watch that part of the process, but we used a real coconut, and I think we used a real pineapple too. It was, oh fuck! It was so good.
Tally's made ice cream before. She made like rose water and pistachio ice cream. And apparently, ice cream is actually not hard to make. It's just a little time consuming.
Yeah,
Because when you want ice cream, you want it now, not in 2 hours.
or like a day.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
day, because it's got to set up.
Ice cream.
Exactly. I just want a blizzard.
Yeah.
Actually, the one pastry I have made before is a quiche. Which was nice.
What
I
Did you make the pastry from scratch and
Yeah.
everything? Nice.
rolled it out with a wine bottle because, as I discovered, my place does not have a rolling pin. So that was a fun discovery to make because I was sure it had one.
I don't know. A wine bottle seems pretty tech.
Yeah.
That seems clutch.
It sounds like sort of like ye World War II tech.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they bombed our kitchen. We still have to make this stuff, so
Yeah.
wine bottles.
I had to roll out the pastry with a Mosin Nagant.
Yeah, and then you cut the bottom off and you make a shape charge out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not how shape charges work.
It actually is.
But it is how pastry works, so be careful. No.
But yeah, no, it worked out quite nicely. It was just like this little tart of achy goodness with leeks.
If you want, if you're ever feeling like you are wanting delicious food, but you are not prepared to like go the full pie route, you can make a galette. I used to make this all the time, but I stopped because it was making me put on weight. But
Galette precious.
a galette is amazing. It's a French thing. It's basically a rough pie, and you can make. I always made it with an olive oil pastry because it was a little like flavor. It was flavorful and stuff. And so basically, you take some pastry and you put it out on a baking sheet, and then you brush it with some butter, and then you put in like fruit, like thinly sliced apples, thinly sliced pears, strawberries, cherries, whatever you have to happen to have around. Put a little bit of sugar on top of that, and then fold your pastry sort of roughly around the edges so it's like a flat, ugly pie. and then you put that in the oven, and then the juices from the fruit come out, and then like cook into the pastry a little bit, and the pastry gets really crispy. Obviously, when you roll the edges back around, you want to do more egg yolk, and then some coarse ground sugar or just sugar. On top, and it cooks in like 20 minutes because there's not like this whole pie infrastructure. It's not very deep, but it's like, so good.
It's like a shallow dish pie.
It's like a shallow pie, and it's really good.
Gorilla pie.
Or a Pop-Tart.
A Pop-Tart.
It's the nicest Pop-Tart you'll ever eat. Let's see.
This is making me hungry again.
I know. So, okay, what's the one thing you will never order at a restaurant because you know that you could make it at home for almost nothing?
I kind of feel that way about gyoza, but that's just because you can just buy them and they cost pennies. And at a restaurant it's like $5. And I feel like an idiot getting it now that I know how to make them at home. I've never made them from scratch, but it's just like the store-bought gyoza are not even that bad. And it's probably the same thing.
Oh, almost certainly. Cam, what about you? What's the one thing you're like, I'm not paying for that at a restaurant? Maybe I only have this thought because I'm such a cheap motherfucker.
I'm trying to think, what can't I make? Or what can I make?
That easily.
Come back to me.
I'm going to say pancakes. You will never see me ordering pancakes at a restaurant because it's the first thing my dad taught me how to make when he was like, you need to learn how to cook for yourself. You're 14. These are good life skills to have. And he taught me how to make pancakes.
You know, I think I might feel the same way. I mean, it's been ages since I had pancakes, but I think like make-at-home pancakes are really good.
They are so good and they are so easy. And if you're thinking, oh, I'll just buy a box of Aunt Jemima, you don't even need to do that. Here's what you do. You take 1 cup of flour, which will make a fuck ton of pancakes for you and friends. So you take a cup of flour. You add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Not very much salt, but a little bit of salt. Then you add about 2 teaspoons of baking powder.
Powder, not soda, right?
Powder. You don't need the baking soda. Baking soda and baking powder have very different uses.
Yeah, you don't want to screw that one up.
Baking soda, baking soda you typically add to like chocolate chip cookies. Baking powder tends to make things rise more. It's basically a 2-in-1. Baking powder is baking soda with the activator added to it. So all you need to do to activate baking powder is add water, or in this case, milk and egg. So then you set that aside. You whisk all that together. And then in another container, you take 2 eggs and you take milk. I'm going to say 1/3 of a cup to 1/2 of a cup. And then you whisk all that together. Then you get your griddle hot and you pour the milk and the eggs into the pancakes and you mix it up. And if you're thinking, this looks a little thick, I want like thinner, larger pancakes rather than like silver dollars. Yeah, you can add a little bit more milk to change the consistency. The only thing is you don't want to mix up your pancake batter till you've like obliterated every single lump. You'll get most of them just by like mixing it together. But the longer you mix it together, the longer you give the baking powder a chance to sit, and your pancakes won't rise as much. So you don't need to overboard. It's not like, some batters where the more you mix them, the tougher they'll get, and like you won't have that chewy elasticity. You just don't want this sitting around forever. Crepe batter is different because you don't want a lot of reaction and rising. But the more you beat this, the more it sits around, and the less fluffy and rich and bubbly your pancakes will get. This is my own personal report for you don't need to make pancake batter perfect and thin.
Well,
if you want to add chocolate chips or fruit, you can do that at this stage, and then you pour it into a pan and make it. Like, that's pancakes. It's so simple. Oh, sorry, and I forgot the one ingredient, about 1/3 of a cup of sugar.
Oh,
you want
yeah.
to add a little sugar to your pancakes. But I have found commercial pancake mixes way too sweet. Especially if you're then going to mix in like fruit or chocolate chips. You don't need to make this sweet. And then cover it in syrup.
Yeah, covered in syrup.
Mm-hmm.
Like, pancakes don't need to be sweet at all.
Butter syrup.
Yeah. I actually remembered what I never order when I go out to a restaurant because it usually leads to disappointment, which is an omelette.
Oh, yeah.
Brunch is a big thing in Victoria with, I don't know, everywhere. Brunch is a new thing. But
White people brunch.
Yeah, exactly. Omelettes suck in restaurants. They're never cooked properly. The ingredients are never right. And I can make a really good one at home.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it seems like the kind of thing that is probably easy to throw together, and so it is thrown together in a restaurant. It's just like, bleh,
well, yeah,
fuck it.
You usually get
order up.
Like a steel insert that's just full of whipped eggs that have been sitting for a couple of hours. And so the proteins have broken down and they're very watery. And it's just ladled out onto a grill or into a pan with a lot of oil. And then a handful of ingredients are thrown on top of it.
Yeah, and then it's folded over.
Yeah, and I can do it so much better.
Oh, what did, pray tell secret omelet tech?
Don't overwhip the egg.
What do you add to the eggs?
Nothing.
Just water?
No, not even.
Just like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you don't...
God intended.
You whip them together until they're foamy, in my experience. But not for very long. I guess you want a violent whipping rather than a long one.
Short and to the point.
Yeah, short and to the point. At least that's what I found. And then, like... God... I can't even describe how to do it. I guess this is my father's frustration with trying to describe how to cook. I don't know. I
sort of whale it in there.
Yeah, I always find that restaurant ones are runny in the middle, and that actually makes me almost nauseous. I hate undercooked egg.
Yeah, that's another thing that puts me off eggs. It's just like if they're in any way undercooked, it's just like I'm gonna vomit.
Yeah, that's why I'm also really sketchy with, or very particular about, like, donburi bowls, because if they do the egg omelette,
yeah,
and it's almost always runny. I hate it.
So you take your egg and you put it in a pan. Is there butter in the pan?
A little bit of oil or butter, yeah.
Okay.
But usually it's nonstick, and then I just let it cook, and it gets nice and brown.
Well, like, at what point, like, there's, like, when you're cooking a pancake, for example, you can tell that it's about time to flip because bubbles will come to the surface and start to pop and won't immediately fill back in.
Yeah.
Which shows you that it's congealed under the heat enough together that there's a good brownness. What is, like, the thing that you look for when you're like, I can flip this omelet?
Basically, you'll be doing kind of a light gold panning motion with the pan for most of this to get, like, the liquid egg up around the edge of the pan where it can cook. And generally, I don't like doing the thing where you're scraping towards the center of the pan all the time to introduce new egg and cook it through, because I find that leads to a very uneven surface. And, like, I like a very even, brown, homogeneous surface to my omelet. So, basically, like, I'm in a position of constantly monitoring it and checking under it.
So do you just flip it up with a heat-proof spatula?
Yeah. Then you add your fillings, which might need to be steamed before and chopped up very fine, because you don't want a lumpy omelet. And then you fold it over, usually with a little cheese in order to seal it shut. And then you continue to cook it side to side.
So you so you have your omelet and you're sufficiently happy with the brownness on the bottom. So then you add your fillings and add some cheese, fold it over top.
And then the real trick is to fold it over top without breaking the spine of it.
Right.
So it can't be like...
That's the part I
That just sounds like experience.
Yeah,
yes.
And it is, and it's difficult to describe. I don't even really intellectually recognize what the signs are for when it's fully cooked, or when it's correctly ready to be filled.
You need to align your chi.
Well, like, I mean, if you're lifting it up with a spatula, here's the thing. I know how to cook an omelet. I'm just not very good at it because I don't like omelets very much, so I almost never do it. And I always, like, fuck up on the flip of, like, getting it over. Because I'm clumsy. But, like, when you're moving around with, like, a heat-proof spatula, which is a fantastic tool to have if you want to learn how to cook at all, because you can check on all sorts of things. Just a silicone one. They're cheap now. And it comes up easily, and it seems to have some flex into it because the proteins have all locked together.
Right.
Is that a good point, do you think?
Yeah.
Where it seems to hold together as you move it around?
Yeah, it just needs enough enough structure to hold together, because otherwise it'll rip at the end, and then you'll disembowel your omelet. Also, like,
once you've got it folded over, and then how long do you cook it for?
Until it's done, until the egg is cooked on the interior, and you can usually tell from its springiness.
Okay, so when you, like,
the old
push it,
cooking
it springs
term
back.
when it's done.
Yeah,
because it's like, well.
So how do you? Once it's folded over, do you flip the folded omelet at all? In the pan?
Yes, yeah. You want to maintain heat because overcooked eggs are terrible.
Right. So you don't want to just flip it over and say, I'm done.
No.
Eggs are just like threading a needle, aren't they?
A little bit, yeah. Also, I hate the way restaurants do toast. It's never properly browned.
God.
It's always like just barely warm.
I mean, this is
then drowned in butter.
This maybe doesn't even count, but you know who does the worst goddamn toast?
Who?
Tim Hortons.
Yep.
With their bagels.
Oh yeah.
Where it's just like
the rim is
burnt
toasted
on the outside and raw in the middle, and it's just like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Can I tell you my secret thing that I do when I want to make like an omelet or an omelet style breakfast for a bunch of people, and I don't like flipping omelets?
Okay.
This is the cheater omelet. So you take, and this is good because it's more of a frittata really, but it doesn't have potatoes in it. And all you do, take your egg mixture and put it in your pan. Basically the same deal, except I do it in a really big pan. Like I have a cast iron pan that I really like. And once it's like done on the bottom, which is the same kind of, generally like experimentally poking up the sides and making sure it seems to be like browning and holding together and you're happy with it. And it's sort of starting to cook in the middle and the top. Throw in your finely chopped ingredients, throw on your cheese, let it cook for a couple of seconds while you bring your broiler up to high. And then toast the top. And it's not a very traditional omelet, and I'm sure Cam is appalled, but it gets all puffy, it gets fluffy, and then you serve it in wedges. So if you need to make omelets for like 4 or 5, 6 people, the best. And as long as you have a good non-stick surface, you should be able to just like cut it carefully, pop it out, serve it, side of toast.
Cray.
Why would I be appalled?
I don't know, because that's not technically an omelet. It's some sort of frittata beast thing.
Well, I am a stickler for tradition.
I am a fence.
Well, basically, I started doing that because I was like, I am shit at making omelets. I hate making omelets. Fuck it. I will come up with a better way of making the same thing. And so if I ever serve you an omelet, that's exactly what I will serve you. Is my beast oven hybrid thing.
And
my
there
abomination.
You have it.
My omeletation.
Omeletation. Well,
A bomb omelet.
That was delicious.
So I hope we inspired you to cook something.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully this was an interesting podcast.
Yeah, if you tried out any of your recipes, let us know. You can either ping us on the forum or let us know on Twitter. Alex is...
wow.
What's your Twitter handle?
Alex Stacy.
Okay. Cam, what's yours?
At Unarmed Oracle.
I'm Kathleen, LRR. Let us know what you thought of these recipes, or if you have any measurement clarifications or anything like that. You can ping us there or on the forums, and let us know if you enjoyed eating that delicious, delicious food. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.